Now, with these factors behind any bit of advice, we may begin to think in terms of karmic difficulties. We begin to realize that where ulterior motive influences the advice, we are already making a serious mistake. The only way in which we can help is when our own affection, our love, our friendship is pure and uncontaminated. If we are trying to do it to improve our own condition, to win the confidence of people we wish to dominate, then we are in bad way. So we can say that karma comes in where there is a misrepresentation as to the importance of knowledge. That karma comes in where an individual is overwhelmed and is no longer able or permitted to think for themselves. This is one point where there's no question that the responsibility is passed on. This person will have to go through a similar experience themselves, and will have to face the chances of being themselves exploited at some future time. Whenever there is an ulterior motive, it whiplashes and comes back at us. Another phase of this particular approach to the situation is that we impose upon others the idea that we are like them and that they are like us in many ways where this similarity does not exist. This is the cause of the favorite statement, if I was you, and then the decision. But never has it been pointed out clearly that I am not you. And for that reason, the whole problem is badly complicated. The woman comes to a neighbor across the fence and says she is going to divorce. And the neighbor says, of course you are. You are certainly going to divorce. He's a perfect brute. How did you live with him this long? The other neighbor, who knows he's a perfect brute, knows it because the wife has told her. She may never have met the husband at all. He might be the perfect brute. You never know. But the neighbor advising, wherever an advice involves a situation that is not obviously constructive, must be taken with a grain of salt. It is perfectly right to say, if you feel that you need to separate, that is your decision. No one should interfere with it. If you want our opinion, we can't give it because we don't know. But somewhere in the great teachings of mankind there is an answer to your particular problem. And when you get to that answer, you will find that it is constructive, idealistic, and inclined to help the person to grow. Comparative religion helps in this a great deal, because many different religions emphasize different aspects of human relationship. And these different aspects can be applied to the problem of the moment. And sometimes we can't find in the scripture just the answer we're looking for, but we can find it in one of the other sacred books of the world, set in a setting that is just as responsible, just as realistic, and just as honorable. So always we have to understand motives. It is motive in almost every case that determines the consequences of an action. It is the motive that causes us to seek help that becomes a very definite factor in what that help is going to mean and how we're going to use it. It is the motive to be a teacher or a helper or to gain a local reputation for omniscience that makes the individual say things that he shouldn't say. He also may also be influenced by a financial situation in which his financial success depends upon agreeing with aggrieved persons who are willing to pay an exorbitant fee. So all these things have to be kind of sorted out. If we are parents, the law is that we have the right to help these young people, that we have a right to coach them in the things we believe is right. We have a right to chastise them in some way if they break the common rules of life before they're old enough to understand them. We have a right to try and make honest citizens out of our own children. We can do all that is possible. But also, it is very likely that the effort will be clumsy, extremely clumsy. We will simply demand obedience, and we will never question in ourselves whether the thing we wanted them to do was suitable for them to do. We demand obedience and allegiance and unquestioning acceptance, but when the child stands a few feet away and looks back at us, they find that we are not the responsible person who could hold their confidence. So there is rebellion where the conduct of the parent is not consistent with the natural integrities of a child. If these integrities are blighted long enough, they will then be corrupted also, and the trouble will spread, sometimes through several generations. Actually, then, all ulterior motives have karmic consequences. The only thing that has no negative consequence is that which is done with fullness of spirit, kindness of heart, and with all the wisdom, insight, patience, and temperance that we can possibly focus upon the situation. We must in no way try to over-influence. We mustn't fall back upon hypocrisies to strengthen our position. We must not try to plead with a person on some religious grounds which is inconsistent with their believing. All of these side factors have to be faced. Now, advice is something that's not really a mental thing at all after it's all said and done. Advice is an exchange of inner understanding. It is a communication on the level of the human soul. The advice that is given without love, without charity, without honor, is not advice at all. It is rather that we must recognize that as the deity, in one way or another, implants upon the face of nature all the truths that we need to know. And man, over the course of ages, has gradually interpreted many of these truths into works, sacred books, art, music, literature, philosophy, and science. Therefore, the great book of solutions unfolds around us all the time. We have to always try to move only from the deepest side of our own nature. This doesn't mean that we can't think, but it means that the real basis of our understanding is a subtle sympathy by which we find ourselves close to suffering and anxious to serve its solution. Any other motive will get us finally into trouble. Always we must realize that our own experience may not be the necessary thing for another person. We have to try, therefore, to gain as much understanding and insight of experience as possible. My reactions to these things have been largely on the level of comparative religion. I'm a little worried about intellectual philosophies because they do get into trouble themselves quite easily, and the sciences ignore too large a part of the person. But in a mysterious way, comparative religion will show us the good in many faiths and help us to find the answer to the problem that we ourselves face. There's a story in Buddhism about the general of the armies who went to Buddha, and he said, "Master, you teach peace. I am the sworn ruler of the armies of my king. I have sworn that I will defend the state. I will defend the liberties of the people. I will defend the ruler, if necessary, with my life. Now you tell me I should be a man of peace." And Buddha said, "Well, not necessarily. The dedications that you have made voluntarily. And you believe they are right. And you believe they are necessary to protect the state. And you believe, if necessary, that you will fight for the state to try to help it. That's all part of your way of life, with one thing you must remember. If that is the way you want to live, you must be prepared to die that way yourself. In other words, if you are a soldier, you must be prepared to face the dangers of that occupation, justified by your belief that it is right. But always any right that is not peace must be guarded by the fact that the person who tries to fulfill that right shall take the same penalty that might be bestowed upon another by his own action. So all the way along you'll find little fragments in the teachings of Confucius, in the teachings of Lao-Tzu, of Buddha, of Muhammad, of all these teachers. There have been moralists among them, mystics in most of these groups, who have tried to solve the problems of life. And they say, for instance, if you are a badly problemed person, if you have a great deal of difficulties and you don't know what to do about them, perhaps the Coptic monks of the desert or some Zen monastery in the hinterland of Japan has something for you. Take your problem, perhaps, depending on what it is, and simply settle down to the organization of your own inner life. Depend more and more upon the spirit in you, and less upon your appetites. Cling closer to your aspirations, and do not be over-influenced by your ambitions. Little by little, cleanse the compound of your own nature, so that you are not concerned primarily with the gratification of any sensory perception, as Buddha points out. Your real purpose is to learn to get along peacefully with eternity, with the everlasting rightness of things, with the eternal justice and the eternal mercy of the infinite. Do not try to get along with the false notions for which you may give your life, for which you may sacrifice your happiness, or break the responsibilities you have with family and home. Accept all of these things, as they do in the Pure Land sect of Buddhism in Japan. The Pure Land sect says, do not go out and become a monk primarily until you have actually fulfilled all obligations of family. When your children are grown, when your children are well established, when your family is happy, and when your marriage partner has the same convictions and dedications, then settle down quietly to the unfoldment of your own inner life. Begin to think in terms of freeing the soul within you from all the burden of appetites, all the burden of false purposes, all the conflicts and competitions of society. Just realize, if you can, and we all gain little by little the power to do this, that the great reality is the discovery of the eternal peace within ourselves, and that peace is the form of deity that is most obvious in the complex structure of mortal bodies. So then this type of thing comes along, you no longer try to be impressive. You no longer try to help people unless they need your help. I told you before about this monk who I think was a perfect example of a type of relationship. He had been a wealthy man and been a businessman, and the sorrows of life and the disappointments of life fell upon him. And he finally decided that his miseries were largely due to the fact that he was so definitely always trying to prevent himself from hurting, that everything had to be sacrificed to him having his way about things, and that when he didn't have his way, the persons who stood between were enemies, they were vicious people, they were misunderstanding people, and he was just tied up into this pattern for most of his earlier life. So he simply put on the yellow robe and became a mendicant. And he made a very simple career out of being a mendicant. He went along the country road and he saw a house with a leaky roof. So he mended the roof, blessed the people, and went on and charged nothing for doing it. In another house there was a group of people, someone was very sick, and the children were underprivileged and in trouble, and the house was run down, and many people were afraid to enter because of the ailment. So he just went in, washed the children, gave them baths, cook the food,